Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers fought hard, but they didn't win. They lose in Denver in Game 5. The series and the season is over. What happened on Monday and what's coming next?
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. No matter how or where you get your podcasts, it's always free, never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube, Andy, is where 24,000 subscribers to the channel are terrified to close their eyes, because when they do, all they see is Jamal Murray. Oh, man, that guy did it to the Lakers again. In Game 5, the Nuggets beat the Lakers 108-106 in a phenomenal game, but one that Lakers fans will be thinking about for a long time. We'll unpack that and a lot of things that are coming next over the course of the offseason, because the Lakers did their exit interviews on Monday.
This is highly unusual for people who are unaware of how this stuff goes. Typically, the team if they're on the road, they come back in town and there's a formal day dedicated where each player comes out one by one after having spoken with, in this case, Rob Pelinka, Darvin Ham, maybe Kurt Rambis, but like the highest ranking people within the organization. You assess the season, potential future, yada, yada, yada. Brian and I have been covering this team now for close to 20 years. We're creeping up on that. I can recall one time where there were no exit interviews, period. I don't remember which season that it was, but I don't recall ever them just deciding to do impromptu exit interviews on the road. It's for those.
I'll do that. I'll do you better. I've never heard of any. Point being, though, that there was a lot of extra news that came out of Monday night, whether you're talking about news around Darvin Ham, LeBron James talking about his future with the Lakers, D'Angelo Russell talking about his future with the Lakers. So a lot more stuff than we can get into in one show. But rest assured, it's all coming over the course of the week for sure. So we'll start, Andy, with the game. And, this was one of these games where you look at it and say it's a classic playoff matchup between two really good teams that you wish was Game 5 in a 2-2 series and not a 3-1, because it had that kind of intensity, it had that kind of emotion. The theater of this game was insane. Guys getting hurt left and right. It was tremendous drama. And you just wish the Lakers had another game, to prepare for coming off this, because once again, they were tight in this series. And once again, Denver was just a little better in those moments where it mattered most.
And look, there are a lot of areas where the Lakers actually were as good as you could reasonably expect them to be. They only turned the ball over 8 times. They won the points in the paint. They actually out-offensive rebounded the Nuggets. They did a lot well in this game. Defensively, I thought they were often very, very on point. You can always point to different rotations that were missed, mistakes that were made, but same thing on the Nuggets side.
Yeah, they gave up 106. They gave up 108 points. Like that, they did not get run up and down the floor off of it and all that kind of stuff. And that was true throughout the series.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of snark from last year, the Western Conference Finals sweep, leading up to where we are now. This is 4-1 as opposed to 4-0. The idea of the most competitive series ever, blah, blah, and people get their jokes off, and that's fine. When you're the Lakers, or a Laker fan, you have relished in and lorded over a lot of success and glory, so you got to be able to take it when it's, spit back in your face. That's part of the deal. But the truth is, last year, the Lakers lost 4 games by a combined 24 points. This year, they lost 4 games by a combined 22 points.
Yep.
That is unusually close.
Yes,
over a
and
series.
two of those coming in the final, either literally at the buzzer or in the final 4 seconds of the game.
What's going to be most frustrating, I think, for Laker fans and for the Lakers with this game specifically is that the area they came up most short was the area most within their control, which is free throws. They went 18 of 27 at the line. That's 9 misses. If they go 21 of 27, which isn't really that great, they win this game 109-108. So in a lot of ways, and it's kind of a microcosm of certain things that went wrong over the course of the season, not everything, but certain things that the Lakers did themselves in, or mistakes that came back to bite them in the ass, certain very winnable games that they played with their food or didn't take seriously, didn't have the proper focus, whatever. Those type of things that are within your own control. This game tonight, where on balance, I thought the Lakers played very well against a team that I think could very well end up going back to back. And
absolutely.
And I think without question, the Lakers over the course of however much longer Denver's in the playoffs, the Lakers are going to go down as one of the toughest opponents they have. It would be hard. It would be hard for Denver to beat another team, by a closer margin than what the Lakers ultimately lost to them by.
Yeah, quick reminder, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. And what I think, and we'll get into some of the individual aspects of this game, but I think you're right. And the not controlling the things you can control it was a theme of the season. There were some uncontrollables, which, over the course of this game, Anthony Davis getting hurt in the third quarter and functionally playing with one arm for the rest of the game, which, to his credit, he kept playing. And under what I can only imagine was a considerable amount of pain, but it had the effect.
Emblematically, the way of AD playing through blank this season.
Oh, yeah. But it also had the, for in this game, had the functional impact of removing him from the Lakers offense.
Yeah.
I think he had 2 shots after the injury. A couple he didn't, but he didn't. He was not able to lift his left arm, and therefore makes it hard to be a really effective offensive player. So these ebbs and flows and the injuries popping up at the wrong time and all of this stuff. But ultimately, like you say, make your free throws. And I think they missed 4 in the fourth quarter. Make your free throws, and it's a very different game. Grab that last, LeBron couldn't quite.
It's a different game because they win it.
Yeah, or he couldn't quite box out Aaron Gordon. And they had bad luck in certain spots. That play where the ball is so short off the front rim that it basically just drops into Jokic's hands. Yep. For an easy putback, where normally a missed shot will bounce differently. The Lakers are preparing for that, and it grazes the rim and falls into his lap. So I'm sure if you broke down a lot of games over the course of a season, in the playoffs, you could find these parallels, but they seemed incredibly obvious and very painful. And then, of course, the coaching questions, which were front and center, and obviously the future of Darvin Ham is, I think, it's the first of the stories that we'll deal with. The LeBron James returning is probably story number 1 for the Lakers in the offseason, what he does with his option, what the Lakers do, re-signing him or not. But until we get to that, it's going to be, is Darvin coming back or not? And the reporting from The Athletic, whether the Shams and Jovan Buha and Sam Amick say that many stakeholders inside the organization do not think he will be back. There aren't that many stakeholders inside the organization. So we'll get to that in a
Dave
second.
McMenamin from ESPN also as well put out a report saying that Darvin's job is very much in jeopardy right now.
Which is what you would expect. And if that's the case, he's almost certainly going to be fired because you don't put those things out and then keep the guy. Or at least you shouldn't. But we'll talk about that maybe tomorrow and into the rest of the week. But Darvin's coaching choices, Austin Reeves only playing 34 minutes in this game. They're very controversial use of timeouts or non-use of timeouts, as has been his habits over the course of the year. So just tons of things happening in this game, like you say, that make it sting. But I will say this, the closeness factor that you brought up, that this series was just as close as last year's and the Lakers won a game where they didn't win one last year, brings up a really interesting question, at least for me, about what the Lakers take away from this series. I want to ask you next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by DoorDash. Mother's Day is coming up, and it is really important to make your mom, the mother of your children, a mother figure in your life. You want to make them smile. Moms are a gift, and therefore, by extension, they deserve gifts. So how about flowers or some type of surprise delivered the very same day with DoorDash? You can surprise her with anything from roses or chocolate or some, fashion that she's really into, or just, is my advice, don't go for clever points. Cut out the guesswork and just ask her, what would you like? And then order that, because it'll make her happy. And no matter what your strategy is, though, all these gifts can arrive at the door via DoorDash. Shop with savings that would make her proud. With a DoorDash membership, you'll save with the $0 delivery fee and reduced service fees on eligible items from DoorDash merchants that meet the minimum subtotal. Other fees, including the service fee, apply. Terms apply. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 plus on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply.
So, a fun side note on this Darvin story, which we will certainly be exploring over the course of the week, Andy, is Mike Malone.
Assuming it takes that long.
Right. I think it will. I mean, I will say the part of why I think the Lakers did their exit interviews right after the game, and did that, is because I do not think they want to put Darvin back in front of the media. I do not think they want to put Rob Pelinka back in front of the media until a decision has been made about Darvin. I don't think they want him sitting there and answering questions about the future of Ham, which is most of Rob's, the Rob's press conference would be divided up into what's the future of LeBron? The answer being, good God, we hope he comes back and we'll, want to make it work. The future of Darvin, and how did you screw up? Like, this didn't work the way that you wanted. I don't think Rob wants to answer any of those questions. So that's part of the reason I think they did the.
Well, I'm going to be very interested to see if Rob Pelinka does, because traditionally, for people who are unaware, the GM or president of basketball operations, whatever is Rob's specific title or titles, he's got like a combo platter going. They typically do an exit interview with the media as well. It'll be interesting to see if Rob does one. If he does one, immediately after some type of clarity with Darvin is established one way or the other. If he does I would recommend Rob not do this, because when he did it before, it was an absolute effing disaster. The first year that LeBron was with the Lakers and they missed the playoffs and Luke Walton was fired, all the players, I think, other than LeBron, who I think he did like a long extended interview right after the last game of the season. And LeBron had been injured anyway. He might have even done it before the game. But all the players did exit interviews. But Rob Pelinka, Kurt Rambis, Jeannie, like, nobody did. And remember, too, this was after Magic abruptly resigned. I mean, like, truly abruptly. Jeannie Buss, nobody knew this was going to happen. Rob Pelinka did not put himself in front of the media until Frank Vogel's introductory press conference, which ended up an absolute sham because nobody had questions for Frank Vogel. Everyone just wanted to ask Rob, how the F did we get here?
It was 45 minutes of, no, seriously, what the F? Like every question was a variation of that.
And Vogel handled it incredibly well.
Yeah,
but
Frank
it was
did great.
It was really unfair to Vogel and really unprofessional by the Lakers.
That's their pattern, and I don't think Rob is certainly. We will not see or hear from Rob Pelinka until some sort of clarity. I agree with you. Is reached around Darvin, and I suspect that will be reasonably quick. Apparently, they're doing an autopsy on the season. They're going to go back and do a post-mortem.
Patient done died.
I mean, you really ought to know. You know, you have to know the answer to this question. If you're really thinking about it now, you either believe, this is what drives me nuts about this idea of like, well, you know, if they gotten swept, you know, he's definitely going to be fired. But you know, but if he got into game 6, then maybe it would be another. Like, no, you either think the guy is the right guy or you think he's not the right guy. Like, you know, nobody in Miami is freaking out because Spo isn't going to beat the Celtics this year because you know he's the right guy. It doesn't matter how many games he wins or loses in this or probably the next 10 playoffs. You should know by now if you think Darvin did a good enough job to come back next year. And to that point, you know, this game was not without controversy when you talk about Darvin. A tremendous amount of time on Lakers social media was devoted to him not calling timeout, for example, or waiting too long, I should say, to call timeout in the third quarter when Denver ate up the Lakers lead and actually pulled ahead. Tons of people upset with Darvin for letting that run happen. The problem was Darvin had actually called timeout twice earlier in the quarter. I think they used one more for AD when he got hurt. But either way, they were down to 3 timeouts, you know, 2/3 of the way through the third quarter. You only get 6 for the second half. And if you think you're going to be playing a long game, they do come in handy, as we found out in the last 3 minutes of the game when the Lakers used their final timeout on a challenge that turned out to be successful.
Darvin was 2 for 2 on challenges tonight.
He was. They used their first challenge 2.5 minutes into the game, which was a debatable question, which we don't need to get into now. But like the point being, it got people angry because Darvin calling or not calling timeouts had been a theme all season long, waiting way too long, not having a feel for the game. In this particular case, I actually think he did have a feel for the game. They called a timeout early in the fourth to give LeBron rest. You want to have that last timeout so you can review something in the last. I think actually in this game, game 5, Darvin's feel was fine, but it reflects the problems of the other. The issue for me with what Darvin did is something, again, that is picked up in the regular season. It's that Austin Reeves did not play enough minutes in this game. He's at worst your 4th best player. There is no reason that he should have been at 34 something minutes, 35 minutes when when your alternative is Gabe Vincent and Spencer Dinwiddie. You're giving you not much.
All I can say is this is from Jovan and Shams and Sam Amick's report in The Athletic. This at least made me feel heard because this is something that came up in tonight's game because Dinwiddie got 14 minutes, Gabe Vincent got 9. Those 23 minutes that Darvin has been insisting on splitting up between the two rather than just giving the bulk to one and then giving the remainder to your starters, Austin and D'Lo, or hell, even Taurean Prince. Quote, the confusion towards Ham's rotation included his decision to split minutes between Vincent and February post-buyout signing Spencer Dinwiddie in the final weeks of the regular season and the playoffs. This broke the rhythm of Dinwiddie as the primary backup guard as he shot 39% from three-point range and was among the team's leaders for a plus-minus after joining, and led to the question as to why the staff did not elect to go all in on one of them, except instead of attempting to force small stretches with each. I feel seen. Because everydayers know I have been bitching about this every single day because it makes no sense.
Keep your best players on the floor. And, Reeves, look, I get maybe trying to buy him a minute or two here or there because it's tough defensive assignment against Jamal Murray, that calf just did not seem to bother him at the end, at the very least. Jesus, he's good. And all that, okay, fine. I get some of that, but there's just, you got to have your best players on the floor. And I think this is my point. I think Darvin's playoffs short as they were fine. Are there questions things that I have? Like this issue here between the Dinwiddie Vincent thing is, I think, one of the biggest issues that came up in the playoffs, like this part of the rotation. But other than that, they're playing a better team. They fought hard. They made some things, some of the lack of play calling. I'm not saying it was perfect. I'm saying it was more or less. The problem with the Lakers in this series was the 82 games that led to it. And that's why Darvin should go. And it was indicative of the lack. Certainly if Lakers fans are going to revolt if he's brought back. And that's not necessarily a reason to do it. You don't fire or hire coaches based on fan polling. But I will say this, because the populace is so stacked against Darvin.
Well, I mean, when we get back, before we get to LeBron, I'll get to an even more direct reason why. Forget what the fans, I think, very clearly think about Darvin. There's a far more pressing reason to go your separate ways.
Oh, there are many. We'll get to it next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball's in full swing. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. To me, Brian, the more obvious, I think, just straightforward reason that they need to part ways with Darvin is because it's become pretty clear these guys don't want to be coached by him.
Absolutely. That is the #1 reason to do it. No question.
Sure. But I'm just saying, in a lot of ways, it cuts through even the noise of the fan reaction of keeping him, because if the fans hated him, but the players loved him, you could learn to live with that. When you've got a situation where it's pretty clear, to everybody's credit, I think everybody, for the most part in this season, maintained professionalism. Certainly down the stretch, these guys were playing very hard because they had to put themselves in a position to even get into the playoffs. And I don't think that their distaste or disdain or confusion towards Darvin led to these guys not playing hard, not trying to do the right things with him as their coach.
If they wanted to have gotten Darvin fired through their play, they could have done it, and they didn't.
Exactly. And they didn't. But it's just very beyond reports, what you hear, all that sort of stuff, you and I both asking around. It's just obvious by the way they talk about the coaching, the way they talk about preparation or the lack thereof that they feel. When the game plan gets questioned enough, the way it has this season, then it's very clear that these guys are not responding to their coach, and they don't want to be coached by him anymore.
I'll put it this way. And look, I mean, I think the reason I brought up the fan thing is just because normally fan opinion is something that really isn't or shouldn't be considered in stuff like this, but it's so overwhelming. I actually do think it's a factor because I think it will impact the next season. It will change the way the team is covered and the noise that's around the season. But I'll put it to you this way. To your point, we've seen a lot. Look, this story in The Athletic is written in the perspective of Darvin should be fired. It is sourced by people who think that Darvin should be fired. And I'm not impugning the reporting. I'm just saying I'm framing the story. But I'll say this, you've seen a lot of stuff like that throughout the season, Darvin, questioning Darvin, you see watching the body language, reports of skeptical players and things like that. You know what you haven't seen all year long? Any kind of leaked quote from a player or personnel, anybody that wasn't very obviously connected to Jeannie or Rob, who have their own, I guess, motivations for wanting to keep Darvin around to different, in different ways. You never saw anything like that. Like, oh, but inside the locker room, there's a strong contingent of players who think that Darvin is being treated unfairly, or think that Darvin is doing a good job, and the players need to step up. Like, none of that ever happened. Anthony Davis, for most of the season until game 2, or a little bit before that, there were a couple comments during the season, but as diplomatic a person as possible, and as supportive of sort of the system, supportive of the organization. He's a company guy, I think it's fair to say. He never, you never heard from him, Darvin's, doing great. Like, whatever. You heard a lot more positive words about Darvin last year. You heard none of it this year. You didn't even see it anonymously, where people would put out stuff on behalf of Darvin. And that tells you that nobody, even if they're not like, actively anti-Darvin, nobody's going to weep if he's gone.
Look, your top 5 players on this team: LeBron, AD, D'Lo, Austin, Rui. I think everybody would agree those are the top 5 players on this team. It's pretty obvious. All 5 have, at some point during the season, even multiple times, expressed some type of confusion about why things are happening a certain way. That ain't a good sign.
It is not. To the point that, when Michael Malone after the game was asked about Darvin, and, heaped praise upon him, as coaches will often do. And it was in one of two things, Andy. It was either, Michael Malone, in the manner that the coaching fraternity sticks up for each other, and said, he's doing a hell of a job, and, because he's trying to help Darvin keep his job, or express at the very least how unfair it is that he thinks Darvin's being treated this way and will be the fall guy. Or he's just trying to keep him in the head coaching job so he can keep coaching against him. Those are the two basic theories.
I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think he can. No, I'm serious. So all these guys recognize, especially now, coaching in the NBA has become a job where you are hired to be fired, and they all hate it. And I think, generally speaking, unless there's animosity between two coaches, they will all stick up for each other. But do I think he enjoys coaching against Darvin Ham? Hell yes, he does. Because he's better than him.
Both things can be true at once.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. I meant to do it in the second segment, and I didn't get to it because we got sidetracked by this whole should the Lakers fire the coach thing, which is a pretty important question. The tightness of this series leaves the Lakers within a really interesting position, because they're obviously not good enough to get over the hump with Denver, but they're also not wildly far away from where the Nuggets were. I think coaching is a big differentiator between these two teams. But Rui said after the game, for example, in kind of lobbying to kind of keep the gang together, that the this continuity, which we talked about with Denver, is one of the big things that helps them. The Lakers have a chance. They can keep the same core together, more or less, assuming LeBron comes back. They can kind of keep it together and hope that sort of internal improvement gets them where they're going. Treat the season a little bit differently next year, be a little more attentive to games. Don't lose twice to San Antonio. Don't lose to some of these other garbage teams. Get yourself into the top 6 so you don't wear yourself out trying to just make the playoffs. But like, the answers to what the Lakers should do probably would have been simpler for them had Denver run them out of, just kind of dominated the series and finished it in 4 without having to work that hard. It would have been easier for the Lakers to know exactly how far away they are and how much needs to change, or what path they need to take to make those improvements in the offseason.
I mean, for what it's worth, you had AD also lobbying for the core. You had Austin Reeves lobbying for the core. LeBron, and we'll get more into this, if not for Wednesday, certainly this week, but we want to make sure that we have more time to truly dig into it. But just so it's clarified, LeBron was very open-ended and non-committal about his future with the Lakers. A lot of ways, his future in the NBA, period. He has a player option for this upcoming season, whether he would opt in or opt out with the idea of getting a longer deal, which has been speculated before. He's talked about a couple times during the year, but he talked about it tonight during this exit interview of sorts that, he's got a son that is, Bronny, that's deciding right now whether or not he wants to try to get drafted or stay in college. He's got another son who's playing basketball. He's got a daughter who's playing volleyball. He's talked about before how there's not really much left for him to accomplish in his career, like other than win another championship. But he's done that multiple times over. There's really nothing left to do. And you start raising the question of, why am I doing this? Is it worth doing this? All that sort of stuff. But, I did not get the impression, though, that LeBron, you always think the team can be made better, but that LeBron was dissatisfied broadly with who they have.
No, and in that report that we've referred to, where we're talking about all the stuff with Darvin, they also note that LeBron's relationship with the organization seems to be pretty good. And ultimately, I think most people expect that the Lakers will bring him back because it's the place that makes the most sense, especially if LeBron wants to get paid, which he seems to want to.
But as to the question that you raised, I think to some degree, the question comes down to, how much do you think injuries held them back? How much do you think Darvin Ham held them back? Like, if there were decisions that were made in the opinions of many people, including you and I, correctly, could they have avoided some of the issues that they had during the season? Will they decide not to defend their IST title with the same vigor that they had pursued it? Right, that they may not pursue it the same way. There's also the question too, and we'll talk about this more at length when we talk about LeBron's future. There is also the practical question of how good you can be during the season when you have a player who's 40, who you have to manage for basically 2/3 of the season in order to get him in the place where he can compete at this level in the playoffs. How much of a ceiling does that put on your regular season? And therefore, the regular season matters because it affects the position that you enter the playoffs in. And that's a big deal.
I think the answer is, I don't think the Lakers can compete for a 1 or a 2, but it's higher than where they were. But it's the whole thing is just sometimes it's easy because they're not. And you look at Oklahoma City swept New Orleans, and Phoenix got swept by Minnesota, and the Lakers ultimately still lost in 5 to Denver. Next year, you're going to be welcoming back a Memphis team that should, I think, go back to being an upper end team in the Western Conference. Like, if everybody stays healthy on that team, they were a 2 seed last year, and they should be somewhere competing for a top 4 or 5 next year, I think. So it's not going to get any easier. So how do you think that if you run it back with a better coach, you get better, the type of results that you think you need? Or do you figure out how to do a Trae Young or a Donovan Mitchell deal or something like that and run it that way? This is going to be a really hard offseason because, and we can quit here and we maybe, you kind of use this as a theme for the rest of the week. When the Lakers went from Russ to sort of this version of the Lakers, they made up a ton of ground, but that was also the easy part to make up. They went from being total non-contenders to having a little something that is real. We talked about sort of the last mile, issues that the Lakers have had against Denver. That applies to being a title contender too. It's like, it's easy to go from, much easier to go from like an 11 to a 5 or 6 or a 7 than it is from a 4, 5, 6, 7 to a 2 or a 1 or somebody that can win a title. It's that small gap the Lakers have to try to figure out how to make up this season with an aging LeBron, with Anthony Davis, who's not getting younger either. So, a lot obviously that is going to have to be unpacked. And first and foremost, though, is the coaching situation.
Yeah. And before we go, just, now that this season is over, I just wanted to, on behalf of Brian, thank everybody for just the viewership, the listenership, the interaction on YouTube and the comments. Our audience keeps growing in both platforms each year. It's a really awesome community. We really appreciate it. You guys are smart, you're funny, you're insightful, you're respectful to each other. And it's really awesome being, I guess the leaders of this particular section of Lakers fandom. So, there's going to be a lot coming up in the off season. There always is, but just as the season's done, we just wanted to make sure that we put it out there. Thank you all very, very much for being there this whole season.
Yep, absolutely. And as Andy says, the engagement doesn't stop. We still are going every day. Through
no. We need to eat this off season. We need you people to stick around.
Yeah. So, we'll still, there's a lot coming up. And the shows don't stop just because the season has. So Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go hang out with 24,000 subscribers to the channel. We'll, of course, be back with all the LeBron news, D'Lo, all that stuff about what's coming up this offseason for the Lakers. See everyone tomorrow.